I'd rather create something that others criticize than create nothing and criticize others.
If you have high quality product behind the bar, it's like a weapon.
It's not about the figures, it's about who those figures are.
The Hospopreneurs podcast.
I'm going to drink this beer.
Yeah, let's crack them.
With James Henderson. Hello and welcome to episode 56 of the Hospopreneurs podcast. This episode means a lot to me. Phil was featured in the Business Review Weekly Fast 100 in 2006, 2007, and 2009, which I used to read growing up. These were the people who I looked up to and ultimately came to define the business world today. Phil revealed that 80% of what he says in this episode he has never spoken about before. Things like the lessons he learned spending time with Richard Branson and insights into hospitality, business, and life. Today, I interview a man who has built a business that ultimately epitomized what Hospopreneurs is about: customer centricity, opportunity, and innovation. Enjoy the episode today. Hello and welcome to the show, Phil.
Thanks for having me.
No worries at all, no worries at all. I'm really excited to get into the interview today. Yeah. As you know, the first question I like to ask is, what's your crazy hospitality story?
Yeah, well, there's a couple, but let's go with one that's coffee related, where I was actually a customer in one of our customers' cafes. So we supplied the coffee at the time to this venue, and I was there paying the bill. And before I paid the bill, there was a lady standing at the counter who was giving just outrageous coffee orders. And it was, I think it was a takeaway coffee at the time, because we're going back about 5 or 6 years ago. And it was decaf this, and half skim milk this, and half hot this, and a shot of caramel this. And it was about 6 or 7 coffees. And the person behind the register, as each coffee got read out, you could just see their face change colour. And they were fuming and fuming and fuming. And by the time it got to the 5th or 6th coffee, I remember the young girl, she would have been in her mid-20s. She's walked around the other side of the counter. She's taken off her apron. She's given it to the customer and said, "I suggest you go make your own bloody coffees because this is ridiculous."
Wow.
And I just burst into laughter. Probably not the best thing to do, but I just burst into laughter going, "Oh my God." I don't know who was right and who was wrong. I mean, they say the customer's always right, but I don't believe that's the case. Yeah. But I tell you, it wasn't 1 or 2 coffees. With every single coffee had a different, element to it. And,
yes.
So in a normal situation, you'd say, how dare the person serving do that? But I tell you, I mean, you probably, validated. So that sticks out for me.
Totally. Thank you for the story. It's interesting, even your comments on that scenario, because I know that the customer and people are so core to your philosophy in business. What is it like? Is it the customer side that's more important, or is it the staff side that's
look, what I always talk about, it's both. It's people, and there's no secrets of where I stand. I always say that in life, business is not complicated, yet people complicate stuff. And from the onset, all we do in business is connect the person to a product or service. So in the coffee business or the hospitality business, what you're actually doing is connecting people to your product and service, and how you do that will be how you emotionally engage. And I often talk about, coffee doesn't walk in the door to buy coffee. You have to be an expert in people. So the businesses that get it right, and it's not just limited to hospitality, businesses that get it right are the businesses that understand people. They understand how to attract people, they understand how to look after people, and they understand how to emotionally engage with people, leaving them with a positive customer experience.
So what is it that you've found in your experience that can really drive into that core emotional response into people?
Yeah, understanding why you're there for. This country's losing its ideology of being in service to people and thinks that other people are in service to us. And simply put, what I do with my teams, and whether it's here, India, New York, anywhere that I've got teams across the globe, I tell them that you are in service to somebody always. And to take that further, it's not what you can get from somebody, it's what you can do for somebody. And if you kept that mentality in your people, and again, it doesn't matter whether it's hospitality or any other industry, whether it's in a marriage, you see marriages break down because it's people, what they can take from each other, not what they can do for each other. We see it with parenting of kids. If it's all about what the kids can do for us versus what we can do for our kids, you lose sight of it. So that to me is the core fundamental of what works is, and a great way to motivate people is to make them understand that they have to be in service to somebody. You're right, and just like I'm in service to somebody at all times, they have to be in service to people, and that's what makes the ecosystem go round.
Yes, and obviously not just the hospitality ecosystem, but in business generally.
Professional, family, and personal.
Yeah.
It's the same philosophy.
Yes.
That you need to be in service. We're always in service to someone or something.
Yeah, fantastic. So on a super, I use the term macro, on a super macro level, why do you do what you do? What is it that really drives you, inspires you?
Yeah, so my why, and that changes obviously as you go through life, but from a career point of view, they say the first one is obviously a job, your second part of your life is a career, and your third is your calling. And I've been fortunate enough now to move into my calling, as I call it. My first as a job was obviously washing dishes, learning hospitality from the ground up while I was studying at uni. That was a job. My career then became Dabella Coffee. My career became being a business owner and opening a business from scratch and building it to one of the biggest of its kind in the country, and then exiting. And understanding that now I'm in the calling section. And so what my purpose is now, my why now, is really to see people accelerate their potential. The thing that really motivates me is seeing other people succeed. So that's not just in hospitality, that's not just in business, but that's also whether they're working for somebody or owning their own business, but at all levels, seeing people really grow themselves, grow their mindset, grow their capability, grow their vision, grow their passion. I really get a buzz out of seeing other people accelerating their potential.
Yes, I'm guessing seeing that growth or being involved, like it's being involved in that growth as well. You're very involved in.
Yeah, well, I'm tangible. I like to see things. I don't, I like to see the product of, the outcome of what you're doing. So, when you're sitting down with somebody for 30 minutes or 60 minutes, or they're listening to one of your podcasts or your flashcast, or they're reading about you, or they're, you're at a speech delivering a presentation, and then you hear the feedback and they say, well, I heard your risk management plan is about get comfortable with your worst possible scenario. Well, this happened not too long ago where a lady said, oh, I heard your flashcast on risk management and I didn't know at the time whether I should be changing jobs. It helped me make my mind up, and I'd been beating myself over a week over it. But once listening to your 10-minute flashcast, I knew exactly what I needed to do. I'd sat down and assessed what the worst possible scenario was. I got comfortable with it and I made my decision. That to me is tangible. I can see how I was able, as a personal brand, as a brand of Philip Dabella, able to positively impact on her and accelerate her potential. And I think my calling card, my brand aspiration is around Gandhi and being part of the change you want to see in the world, and you'll see it up in the office. That's mine. The other one is my wife's. The Oscar Wilde one is hers. About being yourself because everyone else is taken. That's what she believes in, about authenticity and individualism. I believe in being part of the change you want to see. So whether that's politics, hospitality, whether it's schooling, education, whatever the it is, I want to be part of that in one way, shape or form, so that I can see people's growth potential and see it grow, see it accelerate.
Have you found that in a digital world that it's been harder to see those tangible changes?
Look, it's not harder to see it. It's probably more visible to see it. It just doesn't mean it's as authentic as it is. So, if you wanted to get somebody to like you without the digital age, it took a lot longer and a lot more persuading and a lot more, time. Whereas now things happen a lot quicker. People can make their mind up about you very quick. But the level of depth isn't there. That's what's missing. The Italians have got some great little sayings, and one of them is you've got to share a lot of salt together before you know somebody. Now with the digital age, someone puts a few photos up on their social media and all of a sudden they're a guru, or they're not, or they're handsome, or they're ugly, or they're smart, or they're dumb. People make generalizations, classifications and judgments so quickly. And part of that is because of the digital age. Funny enough, and this is one of my real, let's call it, nuggets of wisdom right now that people have said, hey Phil, that's a really deep statement and I want to share it because you're the first person I'd be sharing it with live on a podcast, is in today's day and age we have so much more resources than we've ever had, yet people are achieving so little. If people started with a range of resources at level 5, they'd achieve a level 20. In today's day and age, we have a level of resource that probably starts at 20, but we're only achieving 25. So the range of actual and the level of achievement is lower than it's ever been because we haven't gone on to accelerate our potential with the resources we've got. So one of my benchmarks that I always use to assess a situation, especially when it comes to people, is are they doing the best that they can at the time that it's happening with the resources that they have? And that goes for, think about hospitality. If you're running a cafe, running a restaurant, or you're a customer in a cafe or in a restaurant, before you go and make a judgment about the venue, oh, it's dirty, it's unhygienic, it's slow, it's not good enough. How about asking the following, using the following template? Are they doing the best that they can at the time that it's happening with the resources that they have? Now, that requires a level of what we call emotional intelligence, right? Because a place where the poor chef has fallen sick and can't come into work and they're one chef down, where the lady's mum that normally comes in to be the maitre d' has passed away with cancer and is not at work for a week, with then the delivery of milk didn't arrive, so someone had to run to Coles to go and buy it because the truck driver had an accident, may result in you not getting your food and your coffee and your service to the level that you would normally. Now, you'll either judge that as pathetic and poor, or you'll sit back and go, are they doing the best that they can with the resources they have at the time that it happens? And I'll give you a much clearer example. I never get shitty walking into a venue that is busy and I have to wait. But I'll definitely get shitty walking into a venue when the people are standing around talking and I have to wait. And that is a classic example of your brain automatically going into, is this person doing the best that they can with the resources that they have at the time that it's happening? So, to reiterate, you walk into a cafe or restaurant and it's flat out, you won't mind waiting because you're assessing the situation. You walk into a cafe or restaurant and there's 5 people behind a counter and they make you wait, there's a problem. It's a good little tool, to share obviously with the listeners that, it's a great way to benchmark and measure, not only just in hospitality, but in any business, but people. So are my children doing the best that they can at the time that it's happening with the resources that they have? Are my workers, are my colleagues, is my wife, my husband? You can change the people, but use the same template. And I find it very, very powerful to be able to just pause and reflect and assess the situation correctly. Because what's happened with the digital age is that we get so much data that is incorrect because we don't analyze it correctly. So it's not the data that's important, it's the way we analyze the data that becomes most important. And people are good at collecting data, but they're not always good at analyzing the data.
Are our tools for that data analysis changing?
Of course, it's always changing. The speed at which we can collect it, the depth in which what we can collect.
Do we need to though?
Well, in terms of data, yeah, because the more data you can collect, the better. But you know what hasn't changed and won't change is the analyzing of data. And this is controversial, right? But robots can't analyze data because they're programmed by somebody.
That's right.
So they're only limited to the programming. Whereas humans will always have the advantage of analysation if they can analyse. So what I teach, I've got a 10-year-old and an 8-year-old, and can I tell you that the most important skill that they need to learn right now is the ability to analyse. That's where it'll be. Because functional stuff will be done by robots. Functional stuff will be done by artificial intelligence. But what won't be done is the analysing of data. Anything to do with emotional engagement won't be done by robots and AI because they have to be programmed by someone or something. Right?
People forget that. People forget that it is ultimately the human component that defines it all.
Correct.
We program all the tools. We design everything.
Yeah, and automation's been around for a long time, right? Look at coffee. Coffee machines have been around for a long time. Starbucks spent millions and millions of dollars around automation, and then they pulled them all out because they weren't getting the level of customer service. They found that people didn't want to pay a higher price for coffee if it wasn't made by a person. Automation's been around for a long time, and that's the difference between data collection and data analysation. Being able to analyse that data and make the right strategy because you've got the capability to dissect it down and really hone in on what you need to do or not do.
You mentioned a little bit earlier that you obviously built Debella and you exited. That's a huge, I'm sure you've got whole seminars dedicated to that process. If you could really summarize a couple of quick pieces of advice you have, even if it's negotiating a sale or defining when you're ready to sell a business, whether someone approaches you or you approach someone else.
Of course. So step one. So I'll give you 3 real quick tips because of course that discussion line could go for hours.
Totally.
1, you have to be ready, and ready means different things to different people. Ready to me was that I looked at my life personally, professionally, and family, and whilst I was kicking a lot of goals professionally, I did it tough with family. So I wasn't always there for my kids, and they were young. So it's not like I was able to change quickly. I'd put on a lot of weight, so personally I wasn't healthy. I was high stress, high blood pressure, and from a family point, they weren't getting the attention that I wanted to give them and the time I wanted to spend with them. So the timing was right. Timing in terms of professionally is that we We were number one in the country in what we did, but we still hadn't reached our full potential. So there was the right time to leave something on the table for somebody else, that somebody would see opportunity to grow further. So timing was right. The next thing is that you have to match with the right people. And what I mean by that is when the timing was right to exit, I had several people that were interested in the business. And of course, when you build a business and a brand from scratch, when you exit, you want to be aligned with the right people. And at the time, I had drink companies, I had private equity firms, I had people wanting to float the business. But the person and that was most suited was the retail food group at the time. Now, forget what you hear about the whole franchise side, that's a different division. But the retail food group approached me that they wanted us to be their first ever non-franchise acquisition. They wanted to play in the space of coffee manufacturing for independent cafes. So we were the right fit for them for the right reason, that they wanted to grow. And they wanted me to stay on for the next 2.5 years and run it, which I did, because I didn't formally exit till 30 June last year. You know, and again, that's the coffee side of that business, not the franchising side of the retail food group. So I had to make sure that I was selling it to the right people. So step 1, timing. Step 2, the right audience, the right people. 3, which has been the most important part, be very clear what life after a sale looks like. And that's probably the most important. And I had some really good advisors around me. I used BDO in Brisbane to do my sale, and that was one of the first things that they sat down and spoke to me. What does life for Phil DeBella look like post-sale? So that whilst we went through the process, I had plenty of options at the end on what I could still do. So being 43, I still want to work in the business. And one of them is now that I'm still consulting back to DeBella Coffee, which I'm enjoying, and I've been able to still pursue new business ventures in New York and in India and stuff like that. And, you know, our raw coffee business being ICT.coffee. So I was able to do that. So to recap in very, very short is you've got to make sure that the timing's right, personally, professionally, and family. You have to make sure that you're going to exit to the right people for the right reasons. And 3, you have to know what your life looks like post and exit, because you can't just get caught up in big check numbers and all the rest of it, because sooner or later it's not just about the money, you want to do something else. So you need to make sure that you don't sign documents or sign contracts that limit you, or that you know that you don't have anything else to go to because you don't have a purpose after business. So you need to do. So that's the 3 best things that I can give in such a short period of time.
Fantastic. Yes, thank you for sharing that. And you mentioned ICT. Ray's got an episode on the show a few episodes back as well from the time of recording this.
Fantastic.
I think it was in the late 30s. But on that, when you were building your business, did you have your exit in mind while you were doing it? Did you look for strategic partners?
No, I didn't. The last thing I was thinking was an exit. But then again, I never thought that I would build the size of a business that we did. And I learned a lot through that. By building DeBella the size it was, showed me that when you go about growing something and it's not about the size of it, but you grow it for the right reasons, the size happens. And it's advice I give to people now when they're building a restaurant or building a cafe. I say to them, don't get caught up in the turnover numbers. You've got to know your numbers. Don't get caught up on what you speculate your revenue will be. Get caught up in how many happy people you're going to serve. How are you going to over-deliver on their customer expectation? Because that's true customer service. To me, customer service is over-delivering on someone's expectation. So, and to do that, you need to know what their expectation is. So make it about the people, not about the numbers. Of course, you've got to know your numbers, and the numbers will be a byproduct of the people you serve. Whereas I still hear a lot of people get caught up in, I believe if I open a shop here, I could turn over $30,000 a week, and it's got to be an 80-seater, and we're going to be open this amount of hours. Well, how do you know that area warrants 80 seats? How do you know there's a demand for 80 seats? How do you know that they don't want you to be open earlier and close later, or open earlier and close earlier? How do you know all this? You haven't made it about people, you've just made it about numbers. So that's the thing that a lot of people get wrong, is that they forget the human element of everything. And I always say, if you get the human element right, you can make mistakes on the other side. But if you don't get the human element right, no one's going to tolerate your mistakes.
I like that. Thank you very much. Through a lot of your work, you must negotiate a lot as well. Do you have any tips for negotiating?
Got some great tips. You'll see behind me, I've got a diploma from Harvard from strategic negotiation. And very simply, step 1, know your ZOPA, zone of possible agreement. So when you're negotiating on buying or selling or anything, know what the zone of possible agreement is. So what's the worst possible scenario? What's the best possible scenario? And don't play outside of that zone. 2, and this is extremely important, and I challenge listeners to be very, very conscious and aware of this after they've listened to this podcast, is that anytime you have a discussion with somebody, and everything's a negotiation, but anytime you're having a negotiation, a discussion, a talk with somebody, there'll be 3 levels that you're actually communicating on: power, rights, or interest. And the best negotiators in the world keep everything at interest level. And that's something I challenge, and it's part of my give back of being part of the change I want to see. I, post doing the course at Harvard, I now am very conscious to make sure that any heated discussions or negotiations or conversations are taken back to interests and away from rights and power. And you'll see, just as an observer, listen, Google YouTube conflict and listen to 2 people having an argument, and you'll see that the argument escalates when people talk about rights and power, but calms down when people talk about best interests. So they're the 2 biggest tips I can give anyone around negotiation. Again, that comes from doing a course at Harvard University, which I'm very thankful and grateful that I was able to do. And they were the 2 top messages that came out of that. And It's an honour to share it with, obviously, your listeners.
Yeah, and thank you for sharing that. I read a book by 2, I think, professors from Harvard. I think it was William Ury and another gentleman. I think there were even 3 authors.
Jim Zabinius would have been one of them. Who's the guy that ran the course. So Jim Zabinius is the guy that ran the course for the week that I got to study under.
It was Getting to Yes was the book
there we
that
go.
I read.
Yeah, that's Jim Zabinius.
Fantastic book. Just a quick question before I progress into the latter part of the episode. What does crisis mean to you?
Inability to make a decision quickly, or poor planning. And what I mean by that, of course there's going to be crises that you can't control. Look at the Lindt chocolate episode in Sydney. No one could control that, right? So crisis is broken down into 2, controllable, uncontrollable. Crisis that you can't control is not, you can't do anything about. Crisis that you can control is not a crisis. So, and often when people say I'm in crisis, and I step 1, I go, did they control this or they can't control it? If they can't control it, it's a genuine crisis. If they can't control it, the reason they're in crisis is because of poor planning and the ability to make a decision. So the key is, if you reverse engineer that, is you've got to try and best plan for crises that you can't control. And I mean, I used to chair the CBD Economic Development Board in Brisbane. So when that lunatic in Melbourne let loose with his car and ran people over in Burke Street Mall, obviously that was a crisis that no one could control. So here in Brisbane, we looked at what we needed to do to secure cars not being able to drive on the mall, and we put the bollards. Now, they're not the most attractive things in the world, I agree. However, you have to give to get. And I would rather see a mall that has 1 million people a week walk it, safe, even if it meant that there's going to be some ugly temporary bollards, put up. So that's an example of crisis and then reacting. Now, had we seen that in Melbourne and not done anything in Brisbane, and it happened a week later, then that was the inability of making a decision quickly. That was poor planning, and that crisis happened. So, that's the way I look at the two scenarios.
Yes, and you mentioned being on the board there. Being in a position now where you have the ability to do that, what advice do you have for people who might be at a stage in their career where they're ready to reach out to boards and be part of it?
Well, I've sat on a lot of boards now over the years. So I chaired that Economic Development Board. I sat on the Brisbane Marketing Board. I've done Queensland Tourism and Events. I was part of the board that brought the Brisbane Bullets back to Brisbane. All sorts of stuff. I was the chair of judges for the Queensland Great Awards, Australian of the Year Awards. I've had some really cool positions and stuff. And they all come back to one thing. You've got to be able to dedicate a level of commitment and loyalty, but talent to be part of an orchestra. And what I mean by that is, one person alone doesn't achieve greatness. It's about we, not I. And so a lot of people go on boards thinking that they single-handedly are going to make a difference. You will not make a difference. You'll be part of the difference. So step 1 is to make sure that you are going to be part of a difference, so that you're joining a team that you can collectively make a difference with. Because I've said a lot of no's to boards where, as they've wanted me on there for one reason or another, but I wouldn't have been able to be part of a team to make it look successful, because a man alone can't make a business successful. A person alone can't make a business successful. It takes a team. So identify that you're going to be part of a team that can make something happen. Then have a look at what your actual skill set is. And my skill set revolves around problem solving, strategy, branding, ideation. There are 4 very clear skill sets that I have. It's not legal and accounting. Yeah, I know a bit about legal and I know a lot about accounting, but that's not my area of expertise. So I wouldn't be the person you put on there for accounting or legal expertise. I'm the person you put there for problem solving, strategy, ideation, branding. So know very clearly what your skills are, right? And then 3, you got to be part of a cause you believe in. If you don't believe it, if you're not emotionally engaged with it, you won't give it your best. And I care too much about my personal brand to go and do something half-heartedly. I'm either all in or not in at all.
Thank you very much for the advice. What is it that you're learning about or exploring at the moment?
How to be a better father. Now that I got my wish, I work school hours. I get 10 to 12 weeks a year off. I try not to travel more than a week a month to be a better dad. And to me, being a better dad is helping to support my children, guide my children to be better humans, to understand their purpose, to understand that they've got to fall to rise, that they've, part of winning is losing, part of losing is winning. To understand that it's a journey, not a destination, that their life is all about a journey and it's all about being better tomorrow than today, and then some days you're just going to have a shit day. To be able to have vision, plan, to be courteous and respectful to people, and to be able to be in service and add value to others as well as add value to themselves. So that to me is stuff that I'm working on now, and I find that the better I get at that, the better leader I become, the better business person I become, the better human I become, and I find that the more comfortable I become within myself.
Interesting that when you say, like your answer to what you're learning about is learning about teaching someone else. It's but obviously you've done a lot of teaching, but these are small humans who don't know much at all. So you go ground floor up.
Yeah, but often they know more than what we do, because why? They're instinctively smart. They're not book smart. Children are instinctively smart, and there is so much to be learnt from children. You watch the way children interact in a playground, you watch the way they avoid risk, you watch the way they jump into risk. There is so much to be learnt from kids, and which brings me to a point I often talk about is we just don't sit back and observe enough. We don't pause and reflect. So one of the things I'm working on, and especially taken from someone who's 100 miles an hour, is the ability to pause and reflect. And it was probably not something I was ever good at, well, most definitely not good at it, but something I didn't do often enough. Now I'm becoming better at it, and I try and do it often, is pause and reflect. And just observe, just sit back and observe a bit more, listen a bit more, observe a bit more, see what's going on, and which automatically means you're analysing more, which helps you then create strategy.
And on that, I think it's a good way to step into another question of mine around your creative process. How do you get into a state that really allows creativity to flourish?
Well, I find that I'm at my best creative self when I'm very comfortable, when I'm in control of what's going on personally, professionally, and family. Then the creative parts are going. Otherwise you get yourself into a state of anxiousness. And I don't like being that. I've suffered anxiety over the years, and it's not something that ever goes away. You just learn how to deal with it better. You know that, hey, you need to slow down and pause and reflect and do the rest of it. And that doesn't build creativity, that builds urgency. When I'm at the most calmest, when my life is in harmony, and not in balance, because I don't believe in balance, right? Nothing will ever be in balance. You won't have 8 hours a day to work on personal, professional, family. Sometimes your work needs dedication and you give it to it. Sometimes it's your family that needs it and you give it to it. And sometimes it's you and you give it to it. And when you're in a position to be able to do that, that's what I call a state of harmony. I'm at my most creative when I'm in a state of harmony. So over the 12 months, I've lost a lot of weight. I've had the good 12 months with my family, working school hours, and I've still achieved plenty of things professionally. So this would have to be my most harmonious and creative year ever.
Fantastic. Okay, and because I think about it as spinning plates, it's the same thing, just holding all the plates up. And so being in harmony, from what I gather, is you're describing it that you have the ability to give what parts of your life require attention at the time they require the attention, so you have the resources available.
You do. You've got to give yourself the authority, right?
Yes.
You've got to give yourself authority to self-love, at times to be selfish, and oftentimes to be selfless. And knowing when to do that is only gauged by you. It also ties into a whole heap of other things, like, there's a great book written by Bob Berg, I think it is, The Go-Giver. And it's a small book, and it's an easy book to read. And it's all about what can I do for you. It's all about how you can go through life giving, not expecting anything in return. However, what you're actually expecting in return is self-gratification. You're fulfilling your own self-gratification, which puts you into a state of harmony, which helps you be creative and make smarter decisions, all because you're giving. And it's something from a young age that when I read this book, I then reflected and went, I get excited when I buy gifts for people. So I get excited, even from a young kid. I would buy I'd say to Dad, can I buy Mum flowers? Yeah, sure, son. If we were going over to visit an auntie and we took over flowers or a box of chocolates, I would get excited about it. It's something that I really remember from my childhood, and it's something my parents really encouraged, was this whole, feeling good about giving. And my children do that, and it's amazing. They donate their money from birthdays to charity. So they give to Pajama Foundation, or they give it to the Royal Children's Hospital. They give their money they get given for birthdays to charity, and they feel good about it. If we go shopping, my son will often say, can I buy my friend such and such a present? Can I buy, my daughter will say, can I buy this book for my friend because she wants to read it? So, and I love that. I love that fact that that's cascading down, because I think that's a fundamental element of the whole be part of the change you want to see. That, in a world where everything's moving and spinning so quickly, everyone's becoming me. Everyone's becoming so, centralized and selfish, that it's going to take a lot of people that are completely opposite, that really live those values of giving, and if they're in isolation, then the world's going to become a problem, because everybody's just going to become ignorant and self-indulgent and self-involved. Then we're going to have problems.
How do you, I'm thinking about hiring versus, obviously you're teaching your children that giving is something that's to be rewarded, so you're incentivizing giving. But when you hire people, are you looking for that already, or do you retrain them?
Now, I'm very well known in the industry. I'm very well known in the business community of Australia that I hire on attitude and teach skill. It's been a philosophy of mine from day one. I have the ability to do that because of the industry we're in. Don't get me wrong, I wouldn't want to be hiring a doctor on the right attitude and teach them how to be a doctor, because it's not going to work. But the best example I can use is I've trained many of wait staff in a restaurant, and I see a lot of people hire people that have got a lot of skills in wait staff, and they make the worst wait staff. And what I mean by that is somebody that walks in and just follows the motions and says, now I will bring a bottle of water and a menu. I now will take your drink order. I will now deliver your drink order. I will now take your food menu, food order. I will then bring you the food, and I will ask you for another drink. Becomes very robotic, systematic, and is rushing you. Whereas teaching somebody who has the most beautiful, vibrant personality, who knows how to read people, and sits down and says, what can I do right now to make you put a smile on your face? I can tell you've had a hard day. Somebody that then walks in, knows that a business person has walked in and is in a hurry, in a rush, and wants their food. I just want to check that you're in a rush, because if you are, I'll make sure your order gets put through the express line, because you understand you might be busy. You can't teach this stuff. That becomes innate. That's all attitude based. And that attitude based is what emotionally engages with people. You can teach somebody a system, a cycle of service. You can teach them how to systemize and procedurize service. But what you can't teach them is how to engage with the person based on how they're feeling or what they would like.
On your journey, you mentioned you've had some people to advise you along the way. Have you had any mentors or people that you've really looked up to on your business journey?
Yeah, I haven't had any mentors as such, but there's a couple of people that obviously I'd like to mention. One is Alan Piper, who was the man behind AP Eagers, who passed away many, many years ago. And I got to meet him when I was working in the cafe business while I was studying university. He was a very wise man, and he came from humble beginnings, and he was, probably you could say a bit of a mentor at a time that I was doing it tough. Why my uni still? I could be out here earning real money, working longer and all the rest of it. And he really helped guide me. And I spent probably 6 months with him before I even knew who he was, talking to him. Because he'd come up to the cafe and I'd sit down with him sometimes 15, 20 minutes at a time on my break and have a chat. And of course he found out a love for cars, and then one day he told me what he does, and he brought in his bio, and then I looked him up and went, holy geez, one of the country's richest guys, was the man behind Austral Porsche and all this sort of stuff. He guided me a lot in terms of, the grass may seem greener on the other side, plan for success, make sure you're very clear on what success looks like, make sure that you understand that life is about personal, professional and family. So he was instrumental in my early years. My parents obviously had a big part to play. Being a son of migrants was big. So I learnt values and beliefs that I now see myself passing down to my kids. So my upbringing and childhood was very, very strong because they didn't have a lot of money at all. Like my dad used to earn $450 a week. It was all about moments and not materialism. And that's, whilst I've made some good money now, to me I talk about life's measured in moments. I don't talk about material possessions. Yeah, I like nice cars and nice wine and stuff like that, but that's not what defines me. What defines me is life being measured in moments. And I remember that because some of the best days of my life is being a kid running along the Sandgate Beach Esplanade with my dad chasing me and falling over and hurting himself because he was trying to beat me in a race. You know, it's stuff that costs no money, but I can still remember it. You know, I was standing beside him cooking a barbecue, you know, stuff like that. So some of the most memorable moments, you know. And then I was fortunate enough, and you'll see sitting behind me, I got to spend a week on Necker Island with Richard Branson. And I spent 2 days with Branson. We got drunk together one night. You could see by that photo, we looked pretty drunk. And we talked about the demise of Virgin Cola. He spoke about Virgin Bank, and he talked about all the rest of it. And he's asking me questions. I'm asking him questions. He's offering me if I want to open, you know, espresso bars. And I'm saying, no, I'm not a retailer. I'm a manufacturer. And we just had a great chat for 4 hours getting drunk. And then we had dinner with 10 other people on the island. And he really shaped a lot of my belief around wealth. And the story I'll share very quickly is that he said, Philip, the moment someone's worth more than $50 million, it doesn't matter what they're worth after that. As long as they, you know, are worth that number, that's the magic number in his lifetime. And what he means by that is, once you're worth 50 million, you can buy any car you want, you can stay in any hotel you want, you can fly in the same seat of the plane that he flies in. The difference of him being worth 3, 4, 5 billion, whatever it is he owns the airline, so it comes with stress. I paid to be on the island, he owns the island. I've got less stress, I've got no stress, he's got stress. So it's something I learnt was, once you get to that $50 million bracket and north of it, a lot of people go broke because they're trying to go from 50 million to 100 million, 100 million to 1 billion, and a lot of people go broke and fall over. And I learnt, be comfortable with who you are, what you are. I also learnt something that I really talk about, enough money to do what you want when you want. So financial success for anybody doesn't need to be 50 million, doesn't need to be 100, doesn't need to be 1 million. Financial success to anybody is all about having enough money to do what you want when you want. So somebody who loves to stay in 5-star hotels around the world is going to need more money than someone who loves to travel in a caravan. Both are going to have amazing moments. Both are going to have great experiences. No one is better than the other person, just different wants. Therefore, they need different levels of dollars. Some people don't want to fly on a plane for whatever reason. Some people will only fly first class. Again, different amounts of money. So money as a resource versus money as a measure of success. And that came from Richard Branson, from me analysing out the discussion and the, you know, and the data that Richard and I spoke about. So that was a real good, you know, call it a mentoring session over many hours. And of course, things I can't talk about, that he talked about why, you know, Virgin Cola did failed and why the banks failed. It was a really good, open, honest discussion. And I came away with that going, this man is a human being with a good heart. He's very, very talented, and the best talent he has is his ability to communicate with people. You know, and from that short interaction, I learnt a lot. So that's probably the 3 people that have had the most impact, you know. So Alan Piper, my parents, and then that short encounter with Richard Branson. One thing I love to constantly do is I research businesses and case studies that fail. And I do that because I try and see why they failed and analyse the failures. And then, of course, 1, try not to repeat the mistakes. But 2, have a look at the strategies that I would have built to make it different. And I call that exercising my brain. So I actually love problem solving. I love looking at problems and coming up with solutions, because to me that's exercising my brain, that's keeping me current, that's helping me accelerate people's potential, it's helping me part of the change that I want to see. So it ties into what we call values. You know, and I've got very, very strong values around care. So to me, care is one of the top. So authenticity and care are 2 of my top values. The ability to care for people. I'm in a better space now because I've been able to care for myself. So care and authentic, well, I've always been authentic. Those that know me will know sometimes probably too authentic, too honest. But again, better more honesty than not. But that is something that I've just got to be aware, because your strength can become your weakness at times.
Well, Phil, I'm conscious of the time, so I just have one more question. Who would you like to hear on the show?
Great question. Great question. I would love to hear, here we go, it wouldn't be the entrepreneurial spirit of me if I didn't answer it in a different way. I'd love to see a 45-minute session, broken into 3. Here's a challenge for you. 15 minutes on 3 different age group segments. So I'd love to hear from an 8 to 12-year-old, a 14 to 20 year old, and then a 25 to 30 year old. You could make the ranges bigger if you wanted to. So you might say, hey, let's hear from a 10-year-old, a 30-year-old and a 60-year-old.
Mm-hmm.
But the purpose of that is I would ask the same 5 questions to each generation, because I'd be so interested in the different answers and the scope of the answers.
Fantastic. Thank you very much for your time today, Phil. It was amazing having you on the show.
It's been a pleasure. Thanks for having me.
The show today was produced by Angus Brennan. If you'd like to know more about Hospopreneurs, for advice, insights, and extra content, find us at hospopreneurs.com. Thanks for listening.